Let's get started then. Well, first things first, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. So today, what we're going to be doing is what I call a Black Swan game. And in particular, this is an alternative university game that I've been refining over a little bit over a year now. But this is a special edition. It's the COVID-19 edition. I started working on this game before COVID-19 showed up on the horizon and have made some adjustments to it since in terms of saying, here are some interesting things that we can do with COVID-19 then in the context. So first things first, I'm going to give you a URL, which I'm just going to paste here into the chat space. So I'm going to do that. There you go. And that URL has the rule set for the game as well as the cards we're going to have. If we were doing this face-to-face, I might have some physical cards and some dice and so on. Today, because we're doing this in Zoom, I feel it'd be easier to just give everybody a list of the cards and then explain how the whole thing works. All right? So I'll just give you all a second to download that. And in the meantime, I'm going to make sure I have a copy handy and put it up on my screen as well. So let's do that. All right. So what you see on screen right now is the Alternative Universities game. And let me explain how the game works. The game is based upon David Staley's Alternative Universities, Speculative Design for Innovation in Higher Education. If you haven't read David's book, I strongly recommend it. To me, I have advanced notice of it, and reading it when it came out was amazing. I've gotten so much mileage out of that book. It's incredible. And one of the things that David does is he says, look, we have the idea of a utopia, right? And the utopia is always this touchstone. I mean, utopia means no place. But he talks about utopias that are realizable. So he outlines 10 utopias for universities. And sure, they're utopian visions, but they're only a step away or some degree away from being realized. Okay, so I looked at that, and as I say, I've gotten huge mileage from his thinking and how he approaches it. But looking at the book, I realized something. I realized that you could look at these utopias and extract from each one 2 features, and then you'd have a set of properties that you could use to define a whole universe of alternative universities. So that's the point of departure for this game, saying, okay, take each of these universities, each of these 10 utopias that David outlines in his book. Don't try to reproduce the whole thing. I mean, there's a richness and wealth of thinking there that certainly goes far beyond what we'll use for the game. But for each one, I've chosen 2 key traits that we're going to be using in our game tonight as points of departure for building a new university. What you're going to be doing in your teams, which is building a university that responds to these traits that we're going to see as both governed by traits that you choose as well as by others that are chosen for you. And then you're going to have to deal with both something that's already happened, in other words, that is probably going to happen again, which is COVID-19. But you're also going to have another black swan, which you know nothing about yet. I'm going to throw that at you halfway through the game, or allowed to fly through. Throw sounds kind of ugly for such an elegant bird. But you're going to meet it, and then you're going to have to make adjustments to your design, saying, with that black swan, what do we have to change? Okay, and at the end, we're going to have a quick round of voting and see which one of the designs wins the applause of everybody. Okay, so let's go very quickly through these choices of the cards, just so you understand what each of them refers to, okay? So the first one is Platform University, and Platform University is a university that doesn't have a fixed location and a fixed structure. If you think of the Middle Ages, when students would, basically pay for a professor to create classes, well, it's that idea, but taken to the scale of a university. So students and faculty are chosen by ongoing agreements, contracts, what have you. And also all academic structures are emergent. So departments, etc., are not permanent. They emerge from these interactions of what students and faculty are interested in. The second one of these utopias that you're going to be playing with is the micro college. The micro college is the most micro idea you can imagine. It's centered around a single person. And that single person's interest, topics that they want to work on, so on. So they define that micro college, that micro university around them. via the topics they talk about, their research projects and tutorials they create and so on. And at the same time, of course, then they bring in a whole range of resources, which of course includes other people and so on, for mastery-based learning around that singular vision. The third one is the humanities think tank, and the humanities think tank is focused on the humanities as a way of translating from one domain to another. Okay, and not just a theoretical translation, but a working group translation first, and second, the focus on policy. So research policy, development policy, and forms policy. So these are humanities scholars that are working to translate between domains with a view to policy. The fourth is Nomad University. Nomad University doesn't have a place. It occurs wherever it's logical for it to occur, wherever a project might need it. And once the project is done, so the Nomad University moves somewhere else. And student outcomes are not courses, but rather it's a question of, well, they're working on these projects. How successful are they as they move through these different projects, as they move with the university? The liberal arts college doesn't refer to just a traditional liberal arts college. That's number 5. It rather refers to a liberal arts college that looks at 7 key skills, okay? Complex problem solving, sense making, imagination, multimodal communication, cross-cultural competency, and leadership. And it's based not on just a dab here, dab there. Rather, the idea is that students take month-long courses in all of these areas and semester-long apprenticeships in each focus area. So there's a deep dive via an apprenticeship into each of the focus areas. Number 6 is Interface University. And Interface University is based on a symbiotic interaction between human intelligence and AI. In other words, Interface University has as its heart the idea that, hey, we're going to not just be using AI, but we're looking at the next area. So let's just leap ahead and put at the heart of our university a symbiotic interaction between human intelligence and AI. So all the students are going to be using, leveraging, integrating their thinking with AI thinking to do things. And they're going to also be developing, they're not just going to be using whatever exists, they're going to be developing new forms of AI to tackle new problems and new complex situations. Number 7 is the University of the Body. And the University of the Body is focused upon the idea that you have to use your entire body, so the whole sensorium, okay? So movement, touch, taste, sound, everything is a part, each of the senses gets a workout at the University of the Body in terms of how some aspect of learning and cognition is embodied in it. And then you're talking about a mastery of a range of sensory literacies. Again, you're not talking about students just saying, well, I took the one dance course and that's it for saying movement and the body. No, there's true mastery involved. Number 8 is the Institute for Advanced Play. And the Institute for Advanced Play says, let's use play to explore what if. What if this changed? What if this weren't this way? Or what is sometimes called the adjacent possible. In other words, those things that are not in our universe today, but they're adjacent. They kind of, well, what if we change the universe in this way and we explore it through play? So that's at the heart of this university. And then the groupings are not organized by traditional departments and so on, but rather according to different modes of play. What type of play are we looking at? What type of tools for play, what type of tools for exploration are being used? So it isn't the traditional thematic division of things. Number 9 is Polymath University. And in Polymath University, there are 3 key separate domain areas: sciences and social sciences, arts and humanities, and the professions. And the idea is they work with full competency in each of these. In other words, again, it's not a major and a minor or anything like that. It's no. You go deep, and you could be a true professional with full competency in each of these 3 domain areas. And then student projects are supposed to be transdisciplinary. So they're not just, okay, you work in each area, but then your work remains separate, your competency. It's also, no, your student projects are explicitly transdisciplinary and domain bridging, and they work as groups, but then they take that group work and each of them does an individual integration. That's very important. So it's not all team and that's the way it works, or all individual. Rather, they draw from the group work, from that transdisciplinary integration as a group, to transdisciplinary integration as individuals. And finally, you have Future University, which focuses on the idea of, well, think about futures. So as 4 divisions: scenarios and systems, design fiction, platforming, which refers to the idea of saying, can you create a prototype, a model of something that's going to help you think about these futures, predict the future, work on these futures, and science fiction. And the coursework is divided evenly between pure futuring and applied. So you're going to be looking for projects, probably with application in some sort of public arena to apply your work in future. So those are the 10 utopias that David outlined, and those are the tests I've used. Now, I've chosen, the traits I've chosen are not the only traits of these. I want to emphasize that. So please read David's book if you want the full richness of this. I've just chosen the ones that you can use to make a set of all of these. For those of you who, think of this, might think of this in terms of mathematical or statistical term, it's the equivalent of a basis set. If you've never heard of a basis set in mathematics or statistics, don't worry about it, but I thought it might be a useful term for those of you who do have that back. Okay, so the traits that we're looking at are the ones that I've chosen to highlight, but by no means they're limited to that. However, they're the ones we're going to be using today. All right, so now that you've got this, what are we going to do? Okay, first things first, I want to make sure everybody has the rules. So I'm going to paste again the URL into the chat space. There you go, in case you didn't get it the first time around. You're going to have this PDF in front of you. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to break out into teams. And let me see, how many people do we have right now, Laura, in this space? As I'm sharing, I don't have that screen in front of me right now.
Yeah, I would say we have 10 that we can count as players.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 10 that we can count as players. Okay, so that's, my recommendation is always that you should have at least 3 people per team, okay? So 3 to 4 people, let's make it simple for tonight. Let's just do 2 teams, okay? That will give us about 5 people per team, and that I think will work well. And my experience is if you have fewer than 3, it's not as interesting because you don't have enough people around the table to bat ideas. You also don't want to have many more than 7 or 8 per team because otherwise it becomes really, really hard to do this. Yeah, Maha, I noticed you had a question. Go ahead, please.
And just a thumbs up.
I raised my hand by mistake. I was actually just going to say, especially online, because someone can drop off. That's all I was going to say.
Oh, okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure that if you had a question, we got to it. So, okay. So at any rate, so basically, let's go ahead and we're going to break out into 2 rooms. So each of the rooms is going to be working with a set of cards, and each team draws 2 cards at random from the deck. Now, again, if we were doing this physically, I would actually have you draw the cards. Because we're in Zoom, I actually have, and I swear to you, I actually did do this by random draw earlier. I do have a list of which room gets which set of cards. And then after studying the cards, the team will choose to keep 1 as the basis for the university design and return the other. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes in the room, okay? You're going to have more time in the room, don't worry. But I'm going to give you 3 minutes to discuss which of the 2 cards you want to keep among yourselves and why. And then I'm going to go through the room, so you're going to tell me which one you kept and which one you returned. Now, when you return those cards, I'm going to shuffle the cards, and then I'm going to give each of you a second card. The first one you chose. The second one, you're just going to get at random. And you're going to have to think about along the lines of saying, well, the first card was the one you chose. That's the university design that you want to implement. The second one, pretend that a funder said, well, that's cool, but you have to add this. Or that the legislature, if it's a public university or a public institution, said, great, but you have to add this. So you don't have a choice about including an item from the second card. But at least you can choose which of the 2 features is the one that you see as dominant. If you want to include both, go right ahead, but you definitely have to include at least one. Okay, so you see how this is working. In other words, first you get a choice, but then after the choice from a limited set, nonetheless, you get something that's sort of imposed upon you. And then I'm going, because it's the COVID-19 edition, I'm going to ask you to make a design that's either robust or anti-fragile against a sudden unexpected pandemic, okay? So it'll have to retain its fundamental character, even in the face of immediate quarantines, travel restrictions, what we had to deal with for real when COVID-19 hit. Now, you don't know that it's going to hit again, but your design should be robust or anti-fragile. One very quick comment about a robust and anti-fragile design. The difference between robust is something that you hit it hard and it stays the same. Anti-fragile is something that you hit it hard and it actually gets better or does better than it did before. And that's important because sometimes people merge the two things. You want the signs to be at least robust in terms of how they can respond to black swans, but ideally you'd like them to be anti-fragile. Now, I'm not going to ask you to make sure it's anti-fragile. It can be very challenging, in fact, to make something anti-fragile, especially on the first pass, but it has to be at least one or the other. Finally, somewhere in the design period, about halfway through, one more black swan will make an appearance. And obviously I'm not going to tell you what it is because then it wouldn't be a black swan, you'd know what it is. And you're going to have to make adjustments to your design to account for the black swan. Then at the end of the design period, we're going to give each team 3 minutes to present the key features of their design, including its robustness and anti-fragility features. And finally, you know what, normally we do a vote on the design that has best met the challenge, but we're still at 10 people, right? So, you know, with that in mind, I think I'm just going to say, we'll just have you present both designs. You need more than at least 3 teams for there to be a vote that's more or less meaningful. Otherwise, it winds up being everybody votes for the other team due to politeness. And that doesn't work very well, or votes for themselves out of selfishness. Depends on who's playing the game, right? But at any rate, so normally I'd have a vote, but I think today we've got a small group, so we're just going to have the 2 teams and then do the presentation, and then we'll do a wrap-up after that. Any questions? Maha, we going to finish this in 30 minutes? Yep, that's the goal. This game is designed to be played fast. Now, as people always say, oh, but I could spend hours on this. Absolutely. But the question is, how quickly can you work on it? All right? Mm-hmm. So, any questions or comments? All right, let's everybody go to their breakout rooms. And in each breakout room, I will shortly give you which cards you got. So whoever would like to present from whichever group or whoever's, I don't know if you're doing it individual or as a team, remember you've got 3 minutes to run through the key features of your solution and then your design, I should say, and then we'll do some discussion and wrap up. So who would like to go first?
Oh my God, that's almost as good as Karina.
Beautiful, it went, here they went.
Oh, major fail on our part.
Well,
my pictures are all in the mind.
Which means they're very anti-fragile, right?
Yeah, until somebody hits me in the head.
Anyway, so we started with the University of the Body and added in elements of the liberal arts college. And so we're really focusing on immersive experiences, both in the immersive technology sense and in the embodied experience sense, and also on mindfulness. And then climate change, floods, price hike, oh no! Does someone want to jump in and tell what we did then?
Well, we had already connected, we liked the connection of the body actually to the liberal arts, because by actually being in your body while you're thinking, you could begin to think about where are the real problems and how do you solve them. So when the floods and climate change came, we continued to look for ways of connecting and being engaged. So apprenticeships, working in the community, some of that may have to be virtual because it would have to be safe. And of course, transportation would be a problem. But we could look at, through the lens of the body plus the science, the liberal arts and sciences, we could look at solutions to some of the problems at hand and have students actually studying, what is happening with individuals who are going through this? How can we help them? What are some of the infrastructure problems? How can we help that? And apply all of that. So feel free, someone else, to pitch in whatever I've missed. Or
I think you had it pretty well covered.
I agree.
Good job, guys.
Very nice design. I like a lot, I like the fact that it relates to the pandemic through the body, but at the same time, in the humanities connection, figures out how to use those as bridges to that direct connection. So very nice indeed. All right, we can talk a little bit more about it later, but I want to make sure team room number 2 has a chance to present their solution.
So we didn't draw pretty pictures, so you'll just have to listen to us ramble on. And I've kind of been elected spokesperson, but so our initial selection was Future University, and you know, we figured this was already a fairly robust situation where we have groups organized around developing scenarios and systems where they're already gaming out a lot of future things. And then when we added in the humanities think tank, Maha had a really good suggestion in that we have take advantage of these translational humanities to create sort of a jigsaw puzzle effect where we have interlocking groups where people are in multiple groups, at least 2, that are interconnected, working on different projects, but bringing sensibilities from one project to another. And that this was a rather anti-fragile situation. So when the floods hit and the energy prices doubled, for one thing, you know, we're the Futures University. We already knew this was going to happen. We'd already done scenarios on this, right? You know, also one of the other factors in the Future University here, coursework divided evenly between pure and applied futuring. So we've already had project teams doing things like building out net zero buildings on campus, at least as an experimental level. So we already know a lot of the challenges in creating buildings that are not drawing on the grid and therefore are independent of these price surges because they're generating enough of their own energy to where they can run their server farms and the internet and all the other things that are necessary within the context of the university in a physical space. We didn't really talk too much about physical versus virtual, but obviously, you know, if you have that kind of interlocking jigsaw thing, you could disperse working groups physically in a very easy way, and you know, with different kinds of collaboration types of software and other sorts of things that are, you know, fairly lightweight. So the other thing we talked about early on was the idea of communities of practice and having small groups of students who are self-feeding and self-sustaining to, again, make them more robust and to shock, whatever that may be, whether we're talking about COVID, particularly about, we started talking about COVID, right? Because obviously that was the departure point. So there you go. So we have diversity that's making that interlocking jigsaw puzzle, making the ideas robust. And we have structures built around that with the Future University things that are actually developing things that are not just talking, but actually doing, right? So there you go.
Very nice. Very nice. So I think you can see both of your designs really get at some really powerful ideas, right? And to me, the fascinating thing is, remember, we're just drawing cards from a deck that is based, yes, upon David's work, but it all predates COVID. And yet both of your teams came up with solutions that leveraged key elements of the design in that context, right? Whether it was the body design or the futures design, and also leverage other elements of the overall design to help amplify the effect of the others. Whether it was in team number 2's case, the fact that it was the translational humanities, or in team 1's case, how the liberal arts were playing into that. And then also looking at saying, well, okay, so how do you respond to the other elements, right? And I just pointed out, to be fair, futurists aren't always right, absolutely. But the key is, so, you know, maybe you got lucky and maybe you didn't, but you at least had a better shot at lucky, so to speak, with this than you did not. And again, if you play out these types of possibilities, that's what allows you, someone saying, well, because they assume the futures team had made a reasonable pitch before and kept convince people to, yeah, let's make sure we're energy independent and so on. Well, that's one of the elements that you have there. So maybe they didn't predict exactly, because it's a black swan, you wouldn't have predicted that suddenly these floods hit, decades before anybody expected them, and cause it. And finally people get desperate and say, look, we got to stop people consuming immediately, right? That's not something even the best futures team would have come up with, but they would have come up with, in the world of this, we would have thought about this. And similarly, in the body university, the type of focus on, well, what's making for wellness in that body, the mental health focus, etc., will position you to a point where you say, hey, COVID comes along, and we're not just saying, well, everybody go online and that's it. You're saying, well, hold on, what of that mental health of the student? How does it play out? How do we use these other, liberal arts components to interplay with that? And again, when you're looking at the whole catastrophe type scenario, you don't have the futures team, but you do have a structure that allows you to say, well, how can we deal with some of the stress levels that play into this domain? So anyhow, so I think both of your teams did a great job. So thank you for playing. It's always great when I do one of these sessions and people really leap in, and I think both of the teams did. So thank you. That was absolutely great. So any comments or questions that people have before we call it an evening and send people off to whatever it is they're doing, whether it's bingo or something else?
Ruben, my main question is this game idea copyrighted, or can we go and try it in our own institution to help?
Use it by any stretch of the imagination. I would normally have put a Creative Commons license on it. The only reason I didn't do so is because the titles for each of those universities are David's. And I feel a little uncomfortable without, I am actually talking with David to see if he'd be okay with my putting a Creative Commons license on it. But I haven't, so it's fine because it's still a citation, right? But by all means, please feel free to use it. It's not a problem at all.
That's and it's probably going to get more people to buy his book anyway.
I'm sorry, how's that? Well, yeah, and David's a good guy. I honestly can't imagine he's going to have a problem with it. But as I say, that's the only reason. Most of my stuff always has a Creative Commons license. The only times are times such as this, where I'm referencing another work and I want to make sure that the author is okay. If not, please feel free to play the game, use it in every way. As I say, it's a perfectly legitimate academic citation context for the use, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I simply can't put a Creative Commons license on it, as I say, unless I get a clearance from David to do that. So,
and it wouldn't shock me if you'd sold a few copies of David's book tonight.
Listen, I'll be very happy. It is a remarkably thoughtful book. It's one of those books, as I say, I knew it was coming. And then I picked it up, and then Brian had him on the forum as well, and so on. It really is food for thought. It's a book. I don't know how many times I've gone through it now, because let's put it this way: my virtual copy is heavily marked up. So if it were a physical copy, it would have 10,000 stickies in it and all sorts of things. And it's worth it. In my view, it's really worth it.
Until Amazon takes it back again.
Look,
because of the increase in energy prices, they can't afford to run their server farms anymore.
There you go. Well, what can I say? Yeah, it's one step at a time, right? But other comments, questions, anything any of you would like to comment on the other teams' design? As I say, I'm really happy with what both of the teams came up with. So thank you both. So Maha, absolutely. So thank you again so much. It really is great of you to come by. So thank you. I
hope you can sleep in tomorrow, Maha.
Yes, okay, good night, sleep please, and I'll see you around the conference and elsewhere.